Welcome to the Bruce Collins Show. I'm Bruce Collins, the Baron of Broadcasting. My co-host is Chad the Odometer Miles. Our guest today is Nils Grevillius, the famed private investigator who uncovered corruption in the LA Police Department in regards to the Wonderland murders. He has a new book, The Last Lawman. If you want to join the Bruce Collins Show community, you're free to join our page on Facebook. And also, we always appreciate it if you can subscribe to our channel here on YouTube. I also have another YouTube channel called Bruce Collins Reacts and Stuff that you may also enjoy. And now, on with the show. Allow me to introduce my co-host, Chad Miles, and also Christopher Cartwright. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello,
Hey,
Bruce. Hey, can I tell you what happened to me last week?
No, we don't have any time this week.
Coffee stain on his collar, name tag hanging wrong. Sleep in both of his eyes, red light flashing strong. He shovels up to the camera, cracked mug, crooked tie. Says, I've seen some stupid stories, but this one made me cry. Oh man, it's the Chad Miles Report headlines. The dumbest news of the week. From Florida man fights lawnmower to influx with concrete. We tune in for the train wreck. We can't stop, we lean into read. Yeah, the Chad Miles Report. Streaming the dumbest news of the week. So dumb, so sweet. Breaking cat stuck in a sweater, breaking toast that looks like a face. Council meets about a pigeon who keeps pooping on the mayor's briefcase. He's deadpan reading disaster, that's really just a broken cone. Nation shocked, he says then Snickers by a kid who married his phone. It's the Chad Miles Report headlines, the dumbest news of the week. Grandma banned from local bingo for allegedly counting too quick. We tune in for the train wreck. We act appalled while trying not to scream. Yeah, the Chad Miles Report, serving the dumbest news.
Chad, take it away.
Okay, article number 1. A monkey burglarized a grocery store in Lansing, Michigan, stealing bunches of bananas from the produce section.
Chad. I'm sorry, Chad. We don't have any time this week. Up next is Nils Grevillius, famed private investigator, with his new book, The Last Lawman.
Why did you invite us to record this week if there's no time?
What a ripoff.
Our guest today, once again, is Nils Grevillius. Nils Grevillius is a crime expert, author, and U.S. Army veteran who completed 3 tours of duty in Korea with DMZ service. Nils is the author of The Last Lawman, True Stories of a Private Detective. He is a Los Angeles-based private investigator with more than 30 years of experience conducting cases from all 50 states and around the world. And here is if you're watching this on video, here's a copy of the book, The Last Lawman, True Stories of a Private Detective by Nils Grevillius. Check it out. It's highly recommended. Great book. Nils Grevillius, welcome back to the Bruce Collins Show.
Well, I'm very grateful.
Well,
Thank you for lending me your audience, sir.
I'm grateful to have you back. Now, your book starts with an experience you had working with your father. What happened and how did this shape you?
My father had given up on journalism and was just doing typography and graphic layout design. It was a good way to earn money. He was more and more debilitated from his military service. And we were working the swing shift. He preferred working swing shift because there were fewer people in the shop and he could work at his own pace and that sort of thing. He had taught me how to do elementary maintenance on linotype machines, cleaning the spacing bands. Back then, there were no fonts. They were called typefaces, and they were in huge magazines flat sheet metal things that had to be loaded into the linotype machine, and then there was hand-set type. I knew all of the typefaces by memory, and I didn't need a pica pole to measure them to know which tray they went in. I could redistribute them, and my father enslaved me to do this, Bruce. He collected a few dollars an hour from the shop for me to do it, and would give me about 50 cents for every hour that I worked. But that's how things go, right? So we're in kind of a tough neighborhood in Rampart Division of Los Angeles, working on at nighttime, and we saw an LAPD unit pull over a lowrider. The sort of car preferred not just by car clubs, but also by authentic gangsters at the time. And the officers got into a shootout with the guys in the car. And I witnessed that. My father saw that they had dismounted from their patrol unit with guns drawn and told me to get down. And I knew not to argue with my father. My father had no fear of men, any man. His fears were of institutions like the IRS. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but so we were ducked down at the window line, but still watching the situation unfold. And the lights were off in the shop, so no one could see inside the shop. The lights were just over the work table and over the keyboard of the linotype. It looked almost like the interior of a saloon, Bruce. And a shot rang out from inside the car, and the two cops took care of business with the characters in the car. And my father called. There was no 911 back then. He dialed the operator and said, tell the police to get more units over here. You have 2 officers involved in a shooting. And that night I was interviewed by a man I later found out was a legend on LAPD. He was a detective lieutenant in charge of officer-involved shootings. He was a man named Chuck Higby. And Higby says to me, I'm 10 years old, Bruce. He asked me, can you tell me the truth? And I said, yes, sir. And he says, that's really good, because men who tell the truth don't have to remember anything. And that always stayed with me. And I told him everything that I saw, and he said, he asked me, when I interview your father, is he going to tell me something different? I said, I don't think so, sir. And he interviewed my father separately, and that sort of thing. Later, from a man that I worked with who was retired from LAPD's robbery homicide division, I found out that was Chuck Higby and what Chuck Higby represented to officers on LAPD. He was either going to end your career for bad tactics, bad judgment, breaking the law, breaking policy, that sort of thing, or he was going to help you keep your job and issue a report suggesting or confirming your use of good judgment or tactics. So he was a very important man in LAPD at the time.
One of my first jobs was working at a printing company. I burned plates, metal plates, and we didn't actually have printing presses to be technical. We had what they call duplicators, A.B. Dick press. I don't know if you know what that is.
I don't.
Okay. So I kind of can relate to that. In your book, again, it's The Last Lawman, Nils Grevillius. You write that the younger Nils was a landmine. What does that mean, and how different were you from today?
I wasn't a mature man, and I can quantify maturity in a male. It's the ability to separate what he thinks from how he feels and use one to color the other without overpowering the other. If I'm exclusively emotional and you offend me, I'm going to do violence. If I'm exclusively rational, I'm a machine. I have no feelings. And so it took me a long time to separate what I think from how I feel, and that's when I achieved maturity, sometime in my 20s or 30s. I don't remember the exact day. I think it's a gradual, layered process. But so I'm driving around Los Angeles with a .45 automatic back here and a 2-inch .38 under my left arm. had a shotgun in the back of my car, picking up fugitives, stuff like that. If I had gotten into the wrong situation, I would have used incandescent violence to solve the problem. And just because you can legally shoot people doesn't mean you should shoot people. Like, you get into a
Right.
bad situation, you have to use your best judgment. Just because you have a permit in your pocket doesn't mean that you can, just put hands on people, shoot people, gas people, run them over, stuff like that.
Mhm.
Um, you know, that's to clarify, that's what I meant in the book, Bruce.
Mhm. And what experiences did you take from when you were in the Army? What did you take away from that?
Oh, I learned all sorts of things in text, context, and subtext on how to operate as a surveillant mostly, to see without being seen, to hear without being heard, how to plan operations of a clandestine variety and carry them out without being detected. Whether it's placing a sensor on somebody's car so that he can be kept under electronic surveillance, or perhaps surreptitiously entering a locked dumpster to retrieve evidence in a serious case. Those are examples of things that I learned how to do: pick locks, find wiretaps in the era of analog switching equipment, things like that.
Mhm. And you have a chapter in your book titled The Dark Arts. What are you referring to?
Okay, well, that's a very good question, Mr. Collins. I want to break something down for your audience. A lot of national security writers, let's say, Jim Bamford is a good example. He's a good writer. He writes on the National Security Agency, the FBI, the CIA, that sort of thing. He has good sources. He writes interesting books, but he misses a key point, and I'm going to illustrate what it is. Recently, he wrote a book about, I think it was the CIA and the FBI, and he keeps referring to the people running agencies like NSA, CIA, and FBI as spooks. In the vernacular of the world that I lived in as a counterintelligence man, a Pinkerton agent, contracting, whatever, the spook is the one who actually crosses the border under cover using fake documents or locally sourced documents, who conducts a clandestine operation, who risks their bacon, that sort of thing. That is a spook. The suits at the top are not spooks. They're espiocrats. They're bureaucrats of espionage, and should never be given the honorific of spook necessarily. Now, in human intelligence, there are a few things. There are people who actively collect intelligence. There are people who counter the collection efforts of other intelligence agencies and derive intelligence from that. And there are people who do other things like holy baptism, waterboarding, interrogation, strategic debriefs, that sort of. That's all human intelligence derived from human sources. And sometimes you will hear somebody characterized in this work as a warlock. And it's just a term of art. It doesn't mean that they're a witch or something like that.
Mhm.
It's somebody who has the ability to see things that others don't see, that they don't immediately discern, who can manipulate and control events using different techniques. Now, George Clooney made a ridiculous film called Men Who Stare at Goats or something like that 20 years ago, about the ridiculousness of ridiculous this, the Iraq War, the global war on terror, whatever you want to call it. He
Mhm.
he completely misses the mark. Now, I was indoctrinated in something called neuro-linguistic programming, which involves evaluating, the way somebody communicates, so you know the best approach to make on them when you interview them. And not all interviews are the same. Like, an interview where somebody knows they're being interviewed is an interview. If they know that they are under suspicion, it's an interrogation. If they know that they've done something really bad and they've been absconded to some dark site in Bulgaria or something like that, and they're going to be baptized, well, that might be torture under the terms discussed in Congress and that sort of thing. I want your audience to know that torture does work. That's why they do it. If torture didn't work, nobody would bother with it. Of course it works, especially if you have things to compare the information derived, that sort of thing. Am I an advocate for it? Not necessarily, but the holy baptism, it works, right? So getting back to all that, the dark art of neurolinguistic programming, what if I had a way in conducting an operation when I elicit rather than an interview, where I'm just talking to somebody under a casual circumstance, I have a way of measuring whether or not they're being truthful with me without strapping them to a polygraph and that sort of thing. And by the way, you're talking to a man who's been polygraphed between 50 and 100 times. All right? I have no faith in the poly. I've seen the poly utterly fail. The poly is a box, a machine. A good polygrapher is at all times necessarily a very fine interrogator. If you're not a good interrogator, you're never going to make it using that machine. The machine is meant to convey the seriousness of the situation and give the interrogator something to intimidate Mr. Grevillius and Mr. Collins with when they're strapped down to the box. In fact, there was a polygraph operator at LAPD working in detective headquarters named Youngblood. And Youngblood was a very fierce-looking black Southerner who would do this thing when he'd strap a man to the box. He'd be hanging onto his arm while he's wrapping the thing around him, and he gets right up on him, and he says to him, "Oh, you're nervous. I'll tell you what, boy, if I'd done what you did, I'd be nervous too. They're gonna kill you." He was notorious for getting confessions out of men before he'd even put the box, turned the box on. Okay?
Yeah.
All right? That's good work. That's good tradecraft, right? When I say notorious, he got the job done where other men couldn't. All right? One must always distinguish himself in his work. Bruce Collins distinguishes himself by bringing interesting men and women onto his show and bringing them content that they're not going to see or hear elsewhere. So that's how Mr. Youngblood distinguished himself. Now, in neurolinguistic programming, I'm having a conversation with Mr. Collins. What if I get just a little more specific without giving up too much of this or crossing over into the esoteric weeds of neurolinguistic programming? What if I can discern in talking with you whether you're creating a response or remembering a situation? To create is to lie. To remember is to remember. All right, so that's one thing that I got from neurolinguistic programming, and it's something that I still use. If anybody in your audience ever watched Mad Men, there's an element, an aspect of neurolinguistic programming in public relations, advertising, that sort of thing. If one picks up David Ogilvy's book, Confessions of a Madman, he's talking about the advertising business. If one has any indoctrination at all in psychological warfare, you realize you are reading a treatise on psychological warfare. Getting people to do things which are not necessarily in their best interest. That's psychological warfare. Make them unstable. Make them insecure. Put them to sleep. Make them feel so secure they believe they have nothing to fear from you. It goes, waxes and wanes, goes back and forth between those things. What if you have a virus that's killing people that are vulnerable to respiratory viruses, who are elderly, weak, frail, pre-existing conditions, and then you convince the entire nation that everybody in the country is going to die of this, and then use that to exert political control at the state, county, and federal level to make people do things not in their interest, to transfer wealth make money fly all over the country in different directions. And then when a guy like me looks at, say, the hobo camps under my freeway bridges in Los Angeles, the 70,000 odd people just living in refrigerator boxes and under railway trestles in Los Angeles. They catch everything else. They catch the clap, diphtheria, typhus, whatever. They didn't die. You don't have vast graveyards in the freeway landscaping.
Yeah.
That's psychological warfare, and that's a dark art, Mr. Collins.
Mhm. Now, you mentioned NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and I have a couple questions about that. I know that topic because years ago, when wanting to attract a woman, you watch these pickup artists on YouTube that are talking about body language. So is NLP body language alone? Is it more than that? And also, I saw an episode of CSI years ago where they were interviewing somebody and the person was recalling something. And I can't remember if they looked to their right or their left when they recalled it, but they looked one direction. And on the show, they explained if they look this way, they're telling, they're recalling it. If they look that way, they're lying. Is there any truth to that?
Well, it only works if you map out how the person reacts. So you have to ask a series of innocuous questions to roadmap them. And some people are immune to the thing of where their eyes, go or don't go, or how they respond, that sort of thing. And when it comes to body language, what it is it's called mirroring. If Nils keeps his chin in his hand, Bruce keeps his chin in his hand. If Bruce picks up his coffee cup with his right hand, Nils picks up his coffee cup with his left hand, so that they're doing the same thing at the same time. And what it theoretically does is it establishes rapport. The more comfortable somebody is with you, the more likely they are to be honest, or to at least let their guard down to the extent that you can map them.
Yeah.
Now, when I say some people are immune to mapping, there are a couple of linguistic groups in this world that are unlike other language groups. And I'm going to give you two examples. Georgia in Central Asia was one of the Soviet Socialist republics, one of the 17 Soviet Socialist republics. Their language is unique to Georgia. It is not a Turkic language. It's not a Greek language. It's not a pre-Farsi Persian language. It's not a Slavic language. It's not a Chinese language. It's unique. There's another one in Western Europe, in the Pyrenees Mountains between France and Spain, and that would be, of course, the Basque region. It's not a Gaelic language, not a Latin language, not an Arab language, not a Gothic language, nothing. It's a standalone. And I will tell you what these two language groups have in common, even though they are thousands and thousands of miles apart. They both originally based their numbering system on 22. Do I believe that they are related to each other in terms of linguistics? The possibility exists. It's too unique. And it's rather intriguing to me that the numbering system was based on 22. But this could arise of, the human brain. The human brain is incapable of random activity. And language is merely software.
Interesting. Now, Nils, in your book, The Last Lawman, you write about how confidence men are poorly understood by the public. Where do we get it wrong?
It's the fantasy that that confidence men, they steal your money and they invest it in bonded debentures in the Cayman Islands, and then when they get to be old and gray, they sit on the beach drinking exotic cocktails and chuckling about their big scores and living a life of luxury. When a con man stings us, Bruce, he takes the money and he blows it on cocaine and hookers and the horses and the craps table, and when he's broke, he goes and does it all over again. If they're not in constant motion like a shark, with the water moving over their gills, they die. They have to steal in order to live. They love to steal. And if you sat a confidence man down and you interviewed him, interrogated him, why did you steal Bruce Collins' money? Eventually it will come down to what he will finally say at, his weak moment when he's finally honest. What he will say is, I stole Bruce Collins' money because I'm smarter than Bruce is. And I'm entitled to steal Bruce's money for that very fact. And I don't regret stealing Bruce's money. You can't make me regret this. And I'll never give it back. I would sooner die than give Bruce Collins his money back. Now, this is an element, of course, of psychopathy. These people are psychopaths. They live by this, and they have to do it in order to just even live at a certain point. Once somebody loses their conscience, they cannot, breathe life and oxygen back into the conscience. It's gone forever. And the way that a psychopath is created is key to understanding con men, Bruce. Psychopaths are created through random reward for negative acts. If they could win every time, it would become boring to them. The loss is just as important to them as the win. It's yanking the lever on the machine over and over again, and it rewires the brain chemistry. One of the places where con men find young acolytes to go into the profession, into the trade of being a grifter, a swindler, a confidence guy, an operator, is in the realm of telemarketing. Now, not all telemarketing outfits are the same. Some of them are innocuous. It's your bank or your phone company has a boiler room somewhere with a bunch of phone jockeys calling people and trying to get them to add on to their phone account or, apply for this credit card with these features and bonuses, that sort of thing. That's telemarketing. But how about the telemarketing where they're selling fake vitamin pills to senior citizens? Okay. And they get a big reward for the more of it that they do. And they, maybe they start out believing they're selling real vitamin pills, but if you make 400, 500 telephone calls in a day, you're sharpening up your ability to keep people on the phone. And the man who writes the script, they require them to stick to the script. They're timing what's the average length of the phone call. With this script, we get a 3-second phone call, but with this other script, we get a 10-second phone call as an average. They're going to go with the 10-second phone call. The longer they can keep their mark on the phone, the greater the propensity to make a sale. And it's a numbers game. You make 500 calls in a day, you make 2 sales. Right? But you're rewiring the brain chemistry of the jockey making the phone calls. And so confidence men are always looking for the guy who can make 500 phone calls in a day, and it doesn't ruffle him to be told to go F himself 498 times in one day.
Interesting. So you just inspired me with a question I didn't anticipate coming, but so I'm a Christian, but I recognize that there's a lot of people on TV who call themselves Christians who are confidence men, I believe. And recently, within the last, say, 5 years, there was the government had to intervene because there was one particular confidence man / televangelist who was selling colloidal silver, which could be harmful, but he was selling it as an answer to COVID. So my question is, overall, in your experience, is this a dopamine hit and also when that person collects the money, you've never seen a confidence man who saved and invested the money they have to have that second dopamine hit of enjoying the money, and then they have to go back and ask for more. Is that right?
That's correct.
Interesting.
Now, how dare that televangelist compete with our own government, Bruce?
Yeah, you're right. So I know that probably when you broke the Wonderland murders corruption, you probably weren't that popular with the police at that time. But how has your relationship over the years been with the police?
You're only as good as your last case, even with your own clients, Bruce. When I step through the doors of a police agency and identify myself as a private detective, they roll their eyes. They've met other men in my profession, women in my profession, and usually it's trouble. We're there to investigate them or interfere in a case that they have, that sort of thing. In order to make my bona fides with the police early on, I put myself through police academy. I went through both layers at Rio Hondo, which is a high-stress police academy in Whittier, California. A lot of police agencies send their men and women there. I was the only guy in my 2 academy classes who could call cadence worth a damn. So, I was class vice president in my first academy class as a private detective. So what did that do? It gave me a few connections. When I'd walk into an agency, there might be 1 or 2 officers there who remembered me from training. I took AOT, Advanced Officer Training in Iowa, went from Department of Criminal Investigation in Iowa. It made me a better private detective to do that, but I have to also moderate myself. If I ask them to help me on a case, I'm not doing something for them, I'm doing something to them. Sometimes we have a coinciding interest where, let's say Bruce Collins is a thief and maybe an extortionist or something like that, and they have cases they're trying to make on Bruce, and I have a case I'm trying to make on Bruce. I go in and I do a show and tell. This is what I have on Bruce. Maybe they'll show me a little bit. Here's the situation, though. What I show them, and if they make a case on Bruce, they have to give to Bruce every single thing I have given them under the rules of Brady v. Maryland. So I have to understand that. If this is harmful to my client, I must not do it.
Right.
So occasionally I'll have a cop call me up and say, "What do you know about this guy, Bruce Collins?" And my response is, "Tell me why you're interested, officer or detective or whatever." And then the response, if they don't know me, is always, "Well, that's police business." Well, that's good. On the day that your agency, the Tucson Police, the Pima County Sheriff, whatever, opens its files to me, I will open my files to them. What do you think of that? And then their response is, "What if we come by with a search warrant?" My response is, "Say when." I have to protect my clients. I have to protect the interests of my clients. And the police, they have a job to fulfill. Most of them are pretty good people. And I'm not going to go into the saw of, corrupt cops versus great cops, and there's only 1% of them. I don't care. All right? Most cops are good people. I'm not what
Right.
the bastards in suits who run the agencies are bastards in suits, Bruce.
Yeah.
They have to take their orders from political people. I don't have a politician boss telling me what's a good case and what's a bad case.
Again, we're speaking with Nils Grevillius, The Last Lawman. Great book. I highly recommend it. It's available right now, so you can go on Amazon during this interview and order it today, and I think you're going to like it. Now, Nils, what is organized crime like in Los Angeles, and how have you dealt with it?
Organized crime in Los Angeles is a bit different from, say, New York or Boston or whatever. It's an open city. No one family controls any particular territory. If you're talking about traditional organized crime, La Cosa Nostra, the Italians. And we have a lot of Russians here. West of La Cienega, it's Russian Jews, many of them laundered through Israel. And then east of La Cienega, Russian Armenians. And then we have Russians also. Ukrainians also involved in Russian organized crime, and Hungarians involved in Russian organized crime. Extortion, prostitution, loan sharking. Those are the crimes that they like to keep themselves involved in. Narcotics peddling, that sort of thing. In The Godfather, they show Don Corleone declining to get involved in a heroin deal with Soloso, that sort of thing. Well, the mafia is heavily involved in narcotics trafficking, never doubt it. So there is an organized crime presence in Los Angeles. When I have an organized crime case, there are certain things that I have to do. Often when somebody tells a civilian that he's involved in organized crime or intimates that he is involved in organized crime, it means he's actually an informant. Because those guys never, if they're really in that life, they don't talk to civilians in those terms. They might warn somebody away by saying this is something you don't want to get involved in, and they won't say it in polite terms, though. Now, I've detailed in my book an extortion case involving a member of organized crime who was probably an informant in Los Angeles. And he was from the East Coast. And then, speaking of East Coast mobsters, I also talk a little bit about a character named Whitey Bulger.
Oh.
Irish organized crime from South Boston. I have the thing in the book about him being in West LA a decade, slightly under a decade before the FBI finally arrested him in Santa Monica. And my questions as to what the Bureau knew and what the Bureau didn't know at that time. I'm not going to get under the Bureau's skirts over this.
Sure.
I understand why it is that they might have done it one way or the other, that sort of thing. Whitey Bulger was a very dangerous man. He killed lots of people in South Boston. He didn't kill civilians, though. All of the people that he killed were in his world. They were in organized crime. They were running guns, doing stick-ups, loan sharking, extorting, that sort of thing. It's a tough world.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing I want to get involved in. I know a guy in Los Angeles who imported a couple of guys from back east to rob a drug dealer in West Los Angeles, Beverly Hills area. And they exerted a little violence. They pistol whipped the victim, that sort of thing. And they thought they were going to get $50,000, $100,000 and lots of drugs. Well, they got about $2,000, and the guys who imported from back east got a parking ticket on their airport rental car. And that was how the police finally identified who they were. And when they got, braced back east, New Jersey, New York, whatever, they immediately sang a song. And this guy went to prison for 4 years for setting up the robbery. That's the kind of thing that organized crime gets involved in.
Yeah.
If you go to them for help, you're laying yourself wide open. Some people watch like the movie of the week on ABC, and they think that there are vast legions of hitmen from the mafia just waiting to take a job. Bruce can pay $50,000 and have his bothersome brother-in-law disposed of, that sort of thing. The moment that you go to somebody in organized crime, or even non-traditional organized crime, let's say the Mexican mafia, or maybe one of the motorcycle gangs, and you say, I want this man killed and I'll pay you to do it, you're laying yourself wide open to extortion.
Mm-hmm.
The guy who you approach, who you know to be in organized crime, if he's an informant, he's going to trade your approach to keep himself out of trouble with whichever handling agency he has. He's going to go to the DEA, the FBI, LAPD, whatever, and say, Bruce Collins just solicited me to have his brother-in-law killed. Right? And that's his get-out-of-jail-free card the next time he gets caught up in something he does. Look what I did when you got to bring Bruce Collins in. I was a cooperating witness. Let me off on this one. And Bruce Collins goes to jail for 10 or 20 years. And he may even double bang you. He might collect, $25,000 from you for that before he turns you in.
Wow. Hey, when I was a teenager, I lived in Tucson, and then I moved back to the Bay Area, Northern California, and then now that I'm older, I came back to the Tucson area. But we had a pretty well-known mafia person here in Tucson for many years, Joe Bonanno. You remember him, right?
I do.
And I wanted to ask you, this is kind of a silly question, but do you watch private investigator shows? Do you enjoy them, or are they too silly for you?
I will confess to watching the Rockford Files.
Oh, I love the Rockford Files.
James Garner is a magnetic personality. You could watch him selling women's shoes or something, and he'd be entertaining and that sort of thing. The show, in order for something to be good television in the realm of private detective, whatever, there has to be a murder. There has to be authentic tension, right? So they show Rockford getting into things that, occur every few years in my life, but they occur every week with Rockford, right?
Right.
So but that's just good television. I love that. Barnaby Jones with Buddy Ebsen was a good. Cannon with Robert Conrad was very good. When they come up with ones where they decide that the detective has to be quirky, like Columbo. Columbo's boring because it's the same show every single time, right?
Yeah.
Quincy is the same show every single time, and it's stupid to me. People try, don't you just love Columbo? No, I hate Columbo. Peter Falk was a good actor, but he came up with a routine that earned him probably a great pension as an actor, that sort of thing. I thought it was dull. Macmillan and Wife was a good show, but that was a show about a police officer, and there was a lot of tension in that show. Heck Ramsey, the sort of a cowboy detective type. I forget who the actor was in that. It was a pretty good show. Peter Gunn from the 1950s. Everything's tied up in 30 minutes. For the production values of the show, the mise en scène, that sort of thing, it's a good show. I like it. Dragnet as a police show is without parallel. The 1950s version and the 1960s version are both fantastic. There is an episode from the 1950s where Lee Marvin plays an icy serial killer arrested in an SRO hotel in downtown, one of those grimy flea bags, by Joe Friday and his partner, and he slowly breaks down and gives them a full confession. And it is really good television. But most of those shows aren't. CSI isn't interesting to me. It's the drama over the science. I'll tell you the reality show that I dearly love, and it has to do with neurolinguistic programming, and it is The First 48, where they show these small jurisdiction, Birmingham, Alabama, Charlotte, Mecklenburg, Houston, Texas, Tulsa. The crew of homicide detectives in Tulsa are fantastic. They interview the witnesses, the victims, the perpetrators, that sort of thing. And the case is made in the interview process. And that's the reality of being a homicide detective. What makes homicide detectives elite, Bruce, is their ability to withstand repeated exposure to psychopaths over and over and over again without allowing it to get under their fingernails or on their lapels.
Yeah.
So-
James Garner was one of my favorite actors, and Rockford is my all-time favorite show on TV. I grew up with it. I watched it. My father, it was like a big Friday night event in the 70s. So I watch it with nostalgia. The crazy thing about Garner is he always played Garner, right? So Maverick is basically Rockford in the Old West. But I thought it was a brilliant show. I hope they don't ruin it with the reboot that they're doing for next year. I don't know if you heard about that.
Let's find out, Bruce. Give them a chance, and if they ruin
Yeah.
it, let them go to hell for that. So,
That's right.
so if you like Rockford, Garner played Philip Marlowe, Raymond
Yes,
Chandler's,
I've seen that.
and it's a really good film.
Yeah.
And then there's another one that he did in about 1999 where he plays the heavy. Have you ever seen Twilight with him and Paul Newman and Gene Hackman?
No, but that sounds like quite a lineup.
Well, it's Nuevo Noir of the very best. It's Los Angeles in the late 90s. Reese Witherspoon and Liv Schreiber are in it.
Mm.
You will enjoy it. It's a very fine movie, among my favorites.
I'll check it out. Yeah. Thank you. Now, getting back on target, sorry about that. The Last Lawman, Nils Grevillius, it's a great book. Tell us about gypsy crimes. What are they, and what has been your experience with those?
Well, once again, we are getting into the realm of non-traditional organized crime, transient criminal groups. That's the PC term for gypsies. The Spokane police had to pay a hefty settlement to a gypsy family for using the term gypsy crime in their reporting. Not all gypsies are criminals, just a plurality of them truly are. It would be easy to believe that we are dealing with a group of psychopaths here, but the gypsies are not psychopaths. There are some gypsies who are psychopaths necessarily. They engage in crimes of confidence against outsiders. You and I are gajo. Female outsiders are gaje. And any crime of confidence perpetrated by a gypsy is called the bajur. And it's just something for nothing. Or, we're going to relieve a curse on your family's money, and there's a sleight of hand involving the money. Check all of the money out of your bank and bring it to me wrapped in this silk pouch that I've given you. And they change the pouch and leave town. Most, like 99% of palm reading parlors, see the future, the grimy little storefront in the industrial area offering to tell you your fortune. That is called an offiça in Romanes. And it's being operated by a gypsy female, and her husband and sons are out, doing driveway repair scams or fixing dents in cars for too much money or whatever. They're amusing and they're interesting. Their language is inured to assimilation. It protects them from assimilation because it is an oral-only language. There is no gypsy dictionary that you and I can buy. They are illiterate to the extent that they don't learn to read and write in their own language, and that is to protect them from us. They believe that they are at war with outsiders in some low-key way. And I've heard some amazing stories from gypsies about gypsies. One of them is that Christ was dying on the cross, and a gypsy gave him water. And Christ gave gypsies permission to steal from that time until the rapture, right? That's gypsy, lore. It's mythology. Another great gypsy story I heard, a gypsy finally acknowledged to me that, yes, gypsies are Indians. They're originally from the Punjab region of northern India. So they're not Egyptians or anything else, but they are originally from India. And they even have a caste system called Vitse. So they were in the baggage train of Alexander the Great on his withdrawal from India and Persia. And because they had been allied with Alexander the Great, they had to leave India lest the other Indians kill them. That was a great bit of gypsy lore. I have delineated in my book a store thievery thing that gypsy females would do, where the two gypsy females, young, attractive women, would pretend to be in a fight and wind up ripping each other's blouses off, putting their breasts on display. Well, they affix no sexual, thing to the breasts of the female in gypsy culture. So all of the men in the store are riveted by these two lithe young women topless in the store, screaming at each other, pretending to fight. And while all the men are transfixed, the gypsy men clean the store out, get everything out of the store that they can to, to steal. And then the fight is over and, they flee. So that's an example of gypsy crime. I have gypsy informants. I find them interesting. I don't get too close to these people, of course, and I would always be an outsider as a gajo. I can, I've learned some of their argot, their language, that sort of thing, how quickly they adapt. I know a gypsy woman who's had 20 different aliases in the 30 years that I've known her, but she
Wow.
will never, ever reveal to me her real name.
Fascinating. Again, we're speaking with Nils Grevillius. The Last Lawman is the book, True Stories of a Private Detective. And this is a great book. I hope you can get it today. You will enjoy it. Nils Grevillius, this has been great. Unfortunately, time goes by so fast, but I hope I can have you back sometime in the future.
I'd be delighted to be on your show. I want to thank you for lending me your audience one more time. And I want your audience to buy The Last Lawman. I think they'll find it pretty enlightening, and it's not your typical detective memoir. It's not a running series of gun battles, that sort of thing. It's about the life I lived as a young person, my time in the Army, how all of these things changed me, what I brought to the profession, how the profession changed me, and how I ultimately changed the profession.
That's right. And again, it's The Last Lawman, Nils Grevillius.